So, what do you think is the ultimate experience as a K-pop fan?
Oh man, I think my idea of that has changed just in the last year. If you asked me this before last year, I would have said probably a fan sign where you're getting to talk to them in person. But now that I've done one, I see that I don't know, it's nerve wracking and it's very intense kind of situation. So I'm not sure if it's the ideal thing. And now that we've been through that dance event that we mentioned in the first episode, that was a lot more relaxed. And so I think the best kind of experience for me is when I know that the artist is relaxed and they're not trying to put on for camera. And we're also relaxed because it's not I got to get everything I want in 1 minute. And then the other thing is, man, when they recognize you or remember you at a concert, that's a really cool feeling. And they kind of shout you out or show some kind of appreciation, even for a split second. I think that's amazing. I don't know what else beats those feelings. What about you?
Yeah, I think I have to agree. Having those relaxed kind of environments where you are spending time with your favorite idols, whether it be having a dinner or doing a dance workshop, and to some extent a fan sign, I think those could be considered an ultimate experience. Of course, the concert experience that you just mentioned is elating when it actually happens to you.
Yeah.
For me, and something that is a little bit more where most people will be able to experience once in their lives is being front row at a concert that is dedicated to your favorite idol. And one thing in common with all these different experiences is that they happen in person, face to face, in a social setting. But a few years ago, we had the coronavirus and the pandemic, where social distancing was affecting the regular lives of K-pop fans. So today, we'll be looking at how the coronavirus, or COVID-19, affected the K-pop industry, the subsequent innovations from the pandemic, and the evolution of the industry resulting in the state of K-pop that we know today. Welcome to Diaries of an MZ Generation, where we discuss Korean culture, music, and entertainment. I'm Ellis Tan, and this is episode 3. Today is Friday, January 24th, 2025. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Justin Lee. How are you doing?
Hello. 2025 is about to start in a crazy way for me, probably for you as well. These plans are now solidified, so I can't wait to talk about it because I'm pretty sure we'll talk about it on the podcast. But what's going on with you?
Yeah, I mean, we can just go ahead and say it. We're going to Korea.
We're going to Korea.
We're going to Korea. So we'll be recording over there.
Not your first time.
Not my first time, but Justin's first time. And I'm really looking forward to doing the sightseeing with him and experiencing all that Korea, at least Seoul, everything that Seoul has to offer. So looking forward to that. But do you remember what life was like for you during the lockdown?
Yes. I just realized we didn't know each other before lockdown.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was almost 5 years ago. It's funny, I was working full-time. Dang, my life was so different. Okay, I was working full-time at a media company for a few years leading up to the pandemic. But without getting too much into it, at the same time, I was working on, some side creative endeavors on my own. And right at the end of 2018, throughout 2019, one of those endeavors really took off. To the point where I decided by the end of 2019, it's time to go full time. I'm going to put all my energy into this, see where it goes. And actually, December 31st, 2019 was my last day working at that job. 2020, it's going to be incredible, man. I can feel it. How was your life leading up to it?
Well, leading up to it, I just started a new job.
Oh, okay.
The current job that I have now.
Oh.
And I was just kind of getting into things. But the pandemic definitely put a slowdown to that. I remember during the lockdown, it was a lot of sleeping, watching YouTube, and playing video games because there was just not really much going on. If you had seen any pictures or perhaps a live stream of Times Square in New York City, it was like absolutely dead. And Times Square is a lot of my work. So it was definitely a challenging period for me financially because it's not that I wasn't getting paid, but when you are not working, it just feels like that unproductive feeling is not really fun at all. On the one hand, I had a lot of time to do various things like hobbies or, I don't know, like watching YouTube, for example, right? But as a K-pop fan, it was definitely a trying time.
Tell me about it.
So before we dive in to how the pandemic affected the K-pop industry, let's rewind back to the days before the pandemic. Do you remember what the concert experience was like as a K-pop fan before the pandemic?
Yeah, so like we discussed in the first episode of this podcast, I've been a K-pop fan for a long time, but I didn't start going to concerts until 2017. Probably that's because I just graduated college, started making adult money until I quit that job right before the pandemic. Anyways, but when I started going, Ellis, I couldn't be stopped. And by 2019, I was going to as many as I could. And I think it was around this time, I feel like, unless it's just when I started paying attention to it, I feel like K-pop tours really started taking off. BTS, Twice, Red Velvet, by the way, speaking of front row experience, Red Velvet was my first front row experience. And being that close was unreal. Blackpink, I remember seeing J Park, ITZY. ITZY had their showcase. They just debuted. Big Bang's Taeyang toured before going to the military. That was my first ever concert. I went to Head in the Clouds for Icon, and that was a crazy experience because you are shoulder to shoulder. You are so close to people, as close as humanly possible to the person in front of you, behind you, next to you. That's what it was like at a music festival, I found out. I saw FX's Amber live. I was seeing as much as I could. And like I mentioned, I had a job, but I don't remember working in 2019 at all. I don't know what was going on in my life other than traveling and concerts. That's how prevalent it was at this time. It was a beautiful time. And I'm going to guess that you were doing the same thing.
From my recollection, I did go to a lot of concerts, specifically K-pop concerts and obviously K-Con and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember it being a time where pretty much only the big names had tours. And even when they had tours, they only hit up the major cities like New York, Los Angeles. Maybe they'll stop by Texas or Seattle or Atlanta. But generally, it was a New York or LA type of situation. That's when K-Con had K-Con New York and K-Con LA. But for the most part, there wasn't the same type of concerts that we have today.
Yeah.
And I feel like meeting idols back then was a little bit different.
I think it distinctively feels different. I mean, I only experienced it for about, 2 or so years before the pandemic hit. So I don't know if I can really say, but I mean, you were going to K-Cons for years at that point, right? And so you've seen the evolution. You can talk about the evolution way better than I can.
Yeah, I mean, K-Con for the most part has stayed relatively the same.
Oh, really?
But I feel the concert experience before the pandemic was a little bit more relaxed. And in the case where you actually got to meet the idols that you wanted to see or a VIP type of interaction, I feel like it was a little bit closer.
Yes.
In the sense that there wasn't as many restrictions in some ways. But yeah, I feel definitely before the pandemic, it was a different time compared to today. And it wasn't just meeting idols or going to concerts, but also the content was very different before the pandemic. It was still developing, but definitely not the way that it was today. For example, social media, right? Like Instagram was definitely a thing, but TikTok was still just starting up. And I do think the pandemic had a big factor in the explosion of TikTok. Do you think that there's something to be said about the simpler times of being a K-pop fan before all the content that we have today? It was not being bombarded with YouTube videos from 10 different channels and the V-Lives and then the Weverses and then the bubble chats. And there's so many things now today as a K-pop fan where you can access your favorite idols. But back then, it wasn't like that. It was very simple.
Yeah, it's crazy. Oh man, thinking about it now, I do kind of have fond memories. As hard as it was, I think after the pandemic, after TikTok blew up and things like that, yes, social media expanded to another level. But from what I remember, I wasn't necessarily, the dark ages before the pandemic. When you and I were getting into K-pop, that was a struggle to find subtitles for things, right? That's how, at least for me, all the variety shows were split. I was watching Family Outing Ing Sub Part 1, and then I had to go find Part 2, or Strong Heart episode 402 Ing Sub Part 3. And then you would be lucky to find 720p on Dailymotion, not even on YouTube. It would not be on YouTube for that long.
And all those subtitles were done by fans back then.
Because it also depended on how popular the group was. I remember for Girls' Generation, I knew I could rely on Soshi subs. For those who remember at that time, if I wanted to watch Taeyeon on We Got Married or something like that, Girls' Generation were super popular. I knew finding that sub wasn't going to be hard. And then they also had their signature pink colored subtitles. Or when I was watching Kara, whoever that Good Samaritan was, always branded their subs with orange. I distinctly remember this. But if you were into a smaller group, I think you were just hoping they appeared on a show with a bigger group that had someone doing their subtitles. And then once we got into third gen, to the mid-2010s, I don't think it was a struggle anymore. I think I knew if I wanted to watch Produce 101, I can find it subbed. If I wanted to watch a certain K-drama, I can find it subbed. And then after the pandemic, that's when we were getting official subs. They were now coming from the companies, the creators of the content themselves. Is that how you feel as well?
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like before maybe 2015, it was all fan subs. And only for really popular idols. I remember back then I didn't know how to speak Korean, so it was really difficult as a K-pop fan to find content, especially for idols that may be more on the nugu side of the industry, meaning that they're very much less known, especially internationally. But once third gen was in full effect,
around third
definitely a lot more fans getting into the industry, a lot more people willing to do the subbing as a fan subber. And after the pandemic, for sure, a lot more official subs. I assume these subtitlers are getting paid now, so that's what's happening. Companies like Netflix, Viki, obviously the YouTube channels, the money that's coming in from the Korean content, it gives a reason to pay subtitlers to subtitle these shows and content because K-pop is so global now.
Ellis, do you know what I do miss from those dark ages though?
What?
When we did get lucky enough to find content that we wanted to watch that had subtitles, those Good Samaritans, they also provided context. So like nowadays, because there's so much content going on, right? The subtitles, they tell you what the person is saying or what you need to know, the gist of what's going on. But I remember back then, there seemed to be this unspoken guideline that all of our Guardian Angel subbers were following, and it was to provide context. So the main subtitles on the bottom would tell you what they were saying. And then on top of the screen, it told me what Hyung meant or what Unni meant.
TN. Translator notes.
He's saying that, or they'll be like, oh, he's saying this because in Korea, blah, 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 blah. And so I think that accelerated my understanding of Korean culture, which brought me closer to the artist in a different way. It helped me understand why things were the way they were in Korea. I kind of miss that. I feel like it's missing these days, but I don't know. I don't know how people are picking up on that stuff today. Maybe they're learning it through different avenues, but that's something I feel is missing.
Well, I think today, a lot of subtitlers for these official avenues are more localizing the translation versus directly translating. So if there's like a joke that's said in Korean, they'll try to write it in a way that makes sense in English, for example.
Yeah.
But like even official YouTube channels for different artists, or even these YouTube channels where they do episodic type of content, a lot of them will have subtitles, and not just in English, not just in Korean, but like tens of languages.
Yeah.
If you go to a Twice music video, for example, you click the caption drop down box and go through the list. I would say a good majority of people will be able to find the language that they're looking for in the subtitles.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Definitely a different experience today compared to before the pandemic. But let's get into the pandemic era. And there was a lot of acts during third gen right before the pandemic, such as BTS, Twice, Blackpink, really globalizing the industry. K-pop was thriving, but then the pandemic arrived and K-pop was forced to evolve. So let's go back. It's March of 2020. The world stops. We're in lockdown.
Wait. Before we get into that pandemic, like right when the pandemic started, a little bit of fun trivia. March 2020, COVID was already starting to circulate. The testing was already a thing, but at least in America, everything was still kind of up and running. Do you remember the first big event in our country that basically led to the nationwide lockdown?
I'm not sure. Tell me.
So this catalyst event was 20 minutes away from me in Oklahoma City that set off the chain reaction leading to the US shutting down, right? I still remember that day too. It was an NBA game, Thunder versus Utah Jazz. One of the Jazz players tested positive. The game was canceled. Everyone had to leave the arena immediately. The NBA suspended its entire season because of this. And then right after, the whole country went in lockdown.
Were you there?
No. Thank God.
Do you remember what your last event was before the lockdown?
No, I don't remember, actually. I don't remember. What was yours?
So for me, I remember it very, very clearly because at the time, Everglow was doing their North American tour or their United States tour.
Yeah.
And New York or Jersey City was their second to last stop. I believe it might have been LA. LA might have been the last stop.
Okay.
So Everglow went to Jersey City or New York, New Jersey, and it was right before the lockdown. It was, I think, March 20th or March 19th or maybe March 21st. And the lockdown started maybe March 23rd or 24th.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact dates, but that's just going off of my memory. And I remember going to the Everglow concert. I was with my friend and we weren't even sure if the concert was going to happen because at this point, it was a frenzy as far as people scared of getting COVID. And we didn't know what would happen if you got COVID.
Yeah.
There was a chance that you could die, literally. So here I am with my friend sitting in my car, about to go into the concert. And we're just thinking, man, hopefully we make it out of this without getting sick.
Oh my God.
Both of our moms are nurses. So thankfully we had access to like masks. We were masked up. We got in. And the crazy part is we had this concert. It was a general admission standing concert. So I would say about half of the people who had tickets, maybe a third, did not go. I believe they were offering refunds for people who felt unsafe going to a concert. But me, I had to see Everglow. Right? So I went. And the whole time I was like freaking out. I was like, please just don't let me get COVID. We enjoyed the concert. It was a great concert.
Yeah.
And the crazy part is after the concert, they still did the high touch.
That is crazy.
So we did the high touch.
Chains, gloves, anything? Masks?
No. We were wearing masks.
Right. Was it required?
I believe it was required.
Okay.
They gave hand sanitizer before doing the high touch. But yeah, I remember that because they actually canceled their last show. And Jersey City, the show that I attended, ended up being the last show on the tour. And just a few days later, that's when the lockdown started.
That's crazy.
So do you think K-pop as an industry was better suited than others to maintain its relationship with its core user base?
Yeah, so I don't know what it was like for people in Korea, but I feel like for us international fans, as long as the music and the content was able to come out, nothing would really change for us. There's a National Geographic article called COVID-19 Couldn't Stop K-pop's Global Rise. And I think I agree with that. Like I said, as long as the content and the music and those things were coming out, the relationship is no different for us. We're still watching them through screens, and this wouldn't change as long as it kept coming out. But that was the struggle at first, right? A lot of comebacks were being postponed for who knows how long. But ultimately, I do think the K-pop industry specifically was better suited. So I talked about the NBA earlier. Traveling from state to state, city to city, that's a big part of their business. They have to come up with the bubble and build this entire system so that basketball games could still take place and be broadcasted and keep everyone safe. As a wrestling fan, I'll use the WWE as another example. Traveling, touring around the country on a weekly basis is a core part of their business, right? They had to stop that entirely and quickly figure out a way to adapt. And even when they did, the lack of audience in both these cases, in the WWE, in the NBA, that hugely affects the product. K-pop did have those setbacks, but in my opinion, not to that extent. The artists could still release music videos. They can still release songs. We can still consume those things the same way. I think they realized they could still shoot music shows, which they did. And the lack of audience at a music show is not as jarring as a lack of audience at a basketball game or at a wrestling event where the energy is dependent on that, right? For us, performance videos are a thing. Dance practice videos are a thing. Artists can still go to their company building and shoot fun content, no different than before COVID. The artists can just live stream and talk to fans, no different than before COVID. So while every other industry had those setbacks, and the Korean music industry did too, I think K-pop had a bigger cushion to fall back on just because a lot of it is built on the relationship between fans and artists. And that can still be maintained even without physically being there. Do you have the same thought? Or do you think K-pop was in the same position as every other industry?
No, 100% I agree with what you said. I think K-pop, especially to the global fan base, not much changed, really.
Exactly.
It was really only the people who could actually see them at the music shows or have the fan sign events on the regular, these engagements in Korea that were affected. But as far as global growth is concerned, yeah, definitely the K-pop industry had a leg up compared to others as far as continuing their global growth. They didn't have as much of a slowdown, even though we didn't know how long the pandemic was going to be.
Yeah.
We didn't know how long it would take for them to figure it out with like vaccines and stuff like that. We didn't know how long we were going to be in lockdown. We didn't know when things would start returning to normal. At one point, I remember thinking, man, I'm going to be wearing a mask the rest of my life. I actually had that thought. I really didn't know how it would play out.
Yeah.
And I'm sure companies also had to prepare for that type of situation where we didn't know how long we would be locked down and social distancing and if we would be wearing masks and gloves for who knows how long.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I couldn't imagine going out without one, like at that time.
Yeah.
Like that's so weird.
Yeah, it was because at the time, if you got it, you got it. You had to fight through it or you were going to be having those lasting effects that a lot of people ended up having or even passing away. And with the loss of these live events, these in-person fan engagements and concerts and music shows, K-pop had to adapt. And again, I think they were more well-suited than most to do these adaptations and innovations. And one of the first innovations were online concerts. Streaming, online concerts, live streaming services were built. Things like Beyond Live, KCON created their own concert called K-Contact. It was like a virtual KCON. Do you remember watching any online concerts?
At that time, I did not watch them. I mentioned earlier, like just now, watching music show performances without having that audience, doing fan chants and stuff like that, that's not as jarring. I feel like watching an entire concert, 2-hour concert with no audience, for me, for whatever reason, that was jarring. And I didn't have any interest sitting down to watch it. I know some artists didn't like it. I distinctly remember BTS's RM was like, we prepared all these things just to now do them at an empty studio. It's just not the same. And I felt this, it's not the same. So I didn't watch them myself. Now, that doesn't mean I can't appreciate the innovation that came from these desperate times that changed the industry. Beyond Live is a great service, maybe not at that time, but you and I recently watched a concert together via Beyond Live. We were in different locations. The concert was in Korea in front of their fans. I still felt that energy. We were able to chat during it. I thought it was a fun experience. So while I didn't watch them at the time, I think it was an awesome innovation that came out. Did you watch them?
So during the pandemic, I actually watched a lot of online concerts. I probably watched at least, I don't even want to count, but I probably watched maybe 7 or 8 or 9.
Wow.
I watched a lot of online concerts. I probably watched all the online concerts for all my favorite artists.
So you enjoyed them?
I thought they were fine.
Okay.
I distinctly remember it was very hit or miss.
Yeah.
And it was a while ago now, so I don't clearly remember which ones were my favorites, but I do remember really enjoying G-Idol's online concert. Oh My Girl had a great online concert, even though at the time, I think Binny or Yubin now, she had some type of injury.
Okay.
G-Friend, their last concert was actually an online concert. We discussed G-Friend last week. Their last concert before the end of their contract was an online concert. I watched K-Contact. I did a lot of K-Contact. And I remember the online concert for Twice was the absolute worst show that I had ever seen.
Really? Why is that?
At the time, Twice Lights in 2019 was my favorite concert that I had ever been to. So today, Twice 3, which was their 4th world tour, is my favorite concert of all time.
Wow.
And I went to 6 of them. So 4 from the original tour and then the 2 encore shows. And man, that last New York show and then the encore, those were amazing shows. I still can't forget them. But Twice, I feel, and in some ways, it kind of goes back to what RM was saying. Twice is a group that really feeds off of fan energy.
Yeah.
And them performing in front of an empty studio, essentially, there was no energy in their performance. And they didn't even do an encore. It was just a really bad concert. And I'll never forget. It's probably the worst concert that I've ever seen in my life. So I always tell people it's funny that as far as my concerts lists go, Twice is at the top of the list and at the bottom of my list. But yeah, I remember being scared of buffering issues. And it's still kind of a thing where I remember watching the Idol concert and they actually had technical issues during one of the songs. And I think they had to do the song again because it completely cut out the feed. So I remember that being a issue when online concerts started being a thing. You know, they're still working things out. They're working out the kinks and buffering, you know, not knowing how much load would be on their server, for example, because not everyone used Beyond Live at the time. There was a bunch of different services. I can't really remember all the different ones. And they didn't have a precedent on how much server load there was going to be. So there was lag sometimes. There was feeds cutting out. It wasn't always the smoothest of broadcasts. I remember just crossing my fingers, hoping that, oh, please don't let there be any problems. I remember K-Contact. The first K-Contact was really bad. And K-Contact was essentially K-Con, but everything was virtual. So the music performances were virtual. They did like an AR type of stage. The fan engagements were virtual. They did like Zoom meetings with fans to do the fan engagements. And it did get better. Like K-Contact 2 improved upon K-Contact 1 and K-Contact 3 improved upon the previous 2. I just remember it not being worth the money though. Yeah. But I think the innovation of online concerts, them being forced to create these systems, as you said, it worked out in the long run because the concert that we watched together, we watched the Stacy fan concert together and it was amazing being able to watch that, you and me together. We were on Discord while we were watching it, chatting. And not only that, but we had friends who attended that in person. So I was chatting with them at the same time. So it was very cool in the sense that concerts can become global. Although at the time it was a work in progress, it's definitely an innovation that I think has worked out in the long run.
I think augmented reality is also something, you know, at the time it was to make the concerts more immersive when there was no crowd. But now it's used these days to kind of just enhance the visual aspects of the performance, like with the staging and the sets. So that being brought into the present time, I think that's also something that came out of it that is great now.
Yeah, even I think the WWE uses AR stuff now too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so a lot of innovations forced from the pandemic. But obviously, as a K-pop fan, one of the things that separates K-pop from other music industry is fan engagement. Oh, yeah. And I had mentioned K-Contact earlier. You know, K-Con is well known for having their fan engagement segments. And with K-pop, there's fan signs, there's the events at malls and festivals and things of that nature. But with the pandemic, you couldn't do those things. So how did idols connect to their fan base? Live streaming like Instagram Live. At the time, there was V Live, which got bought out by Weverse. So that's the thing now. There is TikTok. I remember dance challenges. We talked about it a little bit before with ZICO starting up the dance challenges, and now there's dance challenges for everything.
Do you remember when he released that song?
Yeah, any song. That was during the pandemic.
No, but I'm saying he released it, I believe, January 2020. So that was kind of just perfect timing for him, unintentionally, where he released this song. We go into the pandemic. TikTok becomes a thing. He starts this dance challenge thing that is still here to this day. That's crazy.
Yeah, every song or title track that comes out now has a dance challenge associated with it. Sometimes multiple. If there's like a hard version, there's an easy version. I know like Chaeyeon had a very hard version for her one of her songs. So yeah, dance challenges, TikTok, V Live. Again, it got bought by Weverse, so now there's Weverse Live. But one of the biggest innovations were video calls or video call fan signs, essentially virtual fan signs. That was a huge thing because at the time, before the pandemic, the only way to do fan signs were to buy a bunch of albums in Korea and go in person. But during the pandemic, they started the video call fan signs. And now anyone across the world, as long as the store that's hosting the fan sign sells to that country, it opened up the eligibility for fan signs internationally. That was a huge thing. Because I know a lot of people who drop a lot of money buying albums to do these video call fan signs. Yeah. And it continues to this day.
Yep.
These video call fan signs. Probably one of the biggest things. This and online concerts are the two biggest things to come out of the pandemic. Do you think that this is a good thing? Like these video call fan signs?
First of all, I think, them not being able to do fan signs and then thinking maybe we should do it video. And then they opened it up to internationally. That's kind of genius, right? Looking back on it and how prevalent it is today. I think ultimately video fan calls was a good thing for K-pop. Like you said, previously, this experience you could only get in Korea in person. You'd had to be very lucky, very rich to even have a chance. And then all of a sudden, you and I, now we have a chance. And we don't have to travel anywhere or do anything like that. We could still talk to our favorite artists. Now that I think about it though, unfortunately, we've seen it be abused, right? When you're in person and you have their staff, you have managers watching you and things like that, you might not do certain things, but I think we've seen, people utilize this to get an apology from idols or put them in weird positions by asking them inappropriate questions, getting them in trouble for reading too much into things. I'd say, I think overall it's good. You know what? Now that I say those things, I'm starting to change my mind. Is it a good thing? What do you think?
I think it's, as you said, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword because on the one hand, there's the good apples and then the bad apples where, yeah, it's great for all the devoted fans to be able to see their artists, communicate with their favorite idols, have a conversation with them, really get to know the idols. Because I know a lot of idols, they really, well, not necessarily a lot. Some of the idols really just phone it in, unfortunately. But some of the idols do really take those video calls to heart and they really have an impact on the relationship between the fan and the idol.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of friends who the idols know who they are. They know this and that about them. And it really builds that relationship. Could be parasocial, but it's the relationship between the idol and the fan. And when they see each other in person, it's cool, right?
It's really cool.
But on the other hand, we have what you said. There's the bad apples who are doing these things to catch them off guard or something. There's also the case where to do these fan signs, you have to purchase a lot of albums and then the albums get thrown away. So that has been a prevalent problem in the industry with the amount of waste that is created. But overall, I think it's more good than bad, personally.
I think same.
So we discussed this a little bit before, but with all the increased live streaming like Instagram and TikTok, there's all the dance challenges and reels and YouTube shorts. We've got Weverse Live, we got Weverse Posts, we got Bubble DMs, we got Bubble Lives, we got every derivative or alternative of Bubble doing those type of things as well. We got video calls, we have concerts, we have fan signs. Is there too much content or is this a good thing?
I think at a certain point, it does become too much content. I feel like even these days, I'm having trouble keeping up with everything. And I want to keep up with everything because, you know, we want to be in the know. You want to know the inside jokes. And so you're trying to keep up with it. I don't know if it's a bad thing for the artists or the companies just because they're trying to spread their reach as far as they can. So if these fans saw these videos or whatever, but they didn't see it, it doesn't matter. If that one catches their interest, then they garner new fans, right? To me, it's a little harder, but I think it's a good thing for the companies. For the idols having to shoot all these things, I don't know.
Yeah,
I think it kind of depends on the idol and if they enjoy that aspect of their job.
Yeah, because there's not just all the things that I mentioned earlier, but I forgot to mention YouTube. There's the official YouTube channel where they have all the short form content, and then sometimes they'll do special content, and then maybe they'll do cover songs, and then they'll have all the behind the scenes type of content.
Yeah.
And a lot of those get subtitled as well. So that's a lot of effort and work. But then there's also the YouTube channels who are working with the idols to do their type of content, like episodic type of content or interview type of content. And it is a lot of content. But is it too much content? I think, yeah, as a fan, even for my alt group, Stacy, it's hard for me to watch everything, to follow everything.
Yeah.
But like you said, sometimes it's not just this one video that's getting the fan. Maybe it's this specific video because of how they shot the specific content. And it was really funny for a certain subset of individuals. And that's what grows their fan base.
Yeah, it's like this one meme just took off. A certain meme just takes off and then boom, that's all. That's what they wanted right there, right? So
exactly. Like water manager. Or Waymo check. But yeah, there's all these different contents. So,
but I do think the camera is on them a little too much. Even now, Music Bank, you know, KBS, they have the on the way to Music Bank when idols are stepping out of their vans, heading in. That's a thing they upload now. When you're at the airport. And now we have recording behinds, you know, where we get to see them record the entire track. I think a lot of content can be good, but I feel like the camera's on them a little too much now. And
you mentioned the on the way to work for KBS Music Bank. I think SBS The Show or one of those other music shows also has the 퇴근 gear, which is like getting off of work.
Getting off of work, yes. Oh my goodness.
And think of all the selfies that the idols need to take.
Yeah.
They need to take selfies for photo cards. They need to take selfies for social media. They need to take selfies for Weavers. They need to take pictures for Bubble. There's so many selfies.
Yeah, so I think for the idols, it's probably not a favorable thing. I think for whatever group you're into the most, for us, it'd be Stacy. I would rather have less videos to watch, but I guess for the companies, it's way better for them.
Yeah, I guess kind of the way we're talking about it shows how it is. It's both good and bad.
Yeah.
In the sense that it's great because we get to see more of our favorite artists, but it's bad because it's just a lot more work for the artists. And also it becomes work for the fans too, I think.
Yeah.
Trying to keep up with everything.
Yes.
So during the pandemic, we had a lot of debuts actually. Are there any groups that really stood out to you that debuted during the pandemic? Obviously, there's like aespa, IVE, ENHYPEN, LE SSERAFIM. But is there anyone else that you wanted to give special mention to?
I mean, those that you mentioned, but also I think one that I'm going to have to mention, I'm sorry, Stacy. Stacy, our beloved Stacy, also debuted during the pandemic.
Right. But there's also some smaller groups that I am or was a big fan of. There's Gravity, of course. A big fan of Gravity.
Shout out Alan.
Alan! Tri-B, Purple Kiss, Weekly, UA.
Yep.
And another one that I really liked was Lunar Solar.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll bring up a couple more. Secret Number.
Yeah.
I believe debuted in 2020. Right. And Treasure also debuted.
Yeah, so Secret Numbers kind of falls more towards the lesser known groups, but Treasure obviously is a big one.
From a big one.
But during the pandemic, there was social distancing limitations. I feel personally that this affected the groups. What do you think?
Well, first, let me ask you how so?
Well, as a K-pop artist, performing in front of your fans is one of the major highlights of the job.
Yeah.
I know for groups like, specifically for aespa and Stacy, because I followed them closely, they always talked about how it was so nice to be able to perform in front of their fans for the first time.
Yeah. I feel like I could see it as an advantage, actually. I think one thing that I was really fascinated by was watching these brand new groups debut in front of nobody. But the reason I say it might be an advantage is because they've been training and practicing without that crowd. And then now they're performing without one either. I always wondered, are they more nervous? Are they less nervous? I feel like you ask, did that kind of hinder their success? I feel like it depends on the artist and their abilities, because without the audience, without all that stuff surrounding them, and with fan cams now becoming a way bigger thing, I think especially during this time, your performance is being scrutinized a lot more. I remember one of the notable things that Stacy, I'm so sorry to keep bringing up Stacy. I remember some of the notable things that Stacy caught attention for was one time they were performing with their masks on, but people were praising them because, oh, they sound great, even with the masks on. Another thing was, and I remember this so distinctively, some of the members had just gotten their COVID shots. And if you guys remember, when you get your COVID shots, your arm is super sore the next day. Yet they performed the choreography with one arm. They kind of like adapted to it. And so I feel like in certain ways, it caught people's attention, and maybe that kind of thing helped Stacy grab people's attention. I think arguably their performance abilities are some of the things that got attention to them. But I don't know if social distancing itself affected if a group was able to be successful or not. I think what more affected it was the resources your company had. I think at this time, the bigger companies had a lot more resources to pump into content and things like that, and didn't need to rely on the other money-making avenues that you usually would. Now, the smaller companies didn't have those profit opportunities. I think that's what maybe affected the groups more rather than the social distancing aspect. I don't know if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Well, I can tell you right now, at least in my opinion, as far as the groups that are under a larger company, even like a mid-sized company or larger, generally they have the capital to be able to sustain the group through a down period in revenue.
Exactly.
But the problem with the social distancing limitations during the pandemic was mainly not being able to do performances at various festivals around the country in Korea. A lot of smaller groups from these smaller companies, they make money from doing gigs around the country. I think a lot of smaller groups like Lunar Solar that I really loved failed because they were from a smaller company and they couldn't do gigs and they couldn't make any money.
And it's like we said earlier, the more they perform at these festivals, and it's kind of like the content, the more exposure you're getting. So now you take these away. Not only are you taking out the money that you'll be making, you're taking out chances for your performance to be noticed by new fans, by fans that wouldn't have seen you otherwise.
And this limits fan engagement.
Yep.
Because a lot of K-pop fandom is about the relationship between the fan and the artist, and getting to know the artist, their personalities, the things that they like and dislike. And a lot of that is kind of the fun of being a fan of a K-pop idol, I think.
It's a huge part. Huge part.
And without being able to do the fan signs, without having these concerts, these festivals, these gigs around the country, I think it just really limited a lot of either caused the group to disband, like in the case of Lunar Solar, and I'm sure a lot of others. But also groups like Gravity, although they were big when they debuted, I feel because they weren't able to produce the same growth because of being limited, there's newer groups that had come out now that's kind of just overtaken them.
Yeah.
Even though Gravity is still around because they're from a large label, Starship, I don't think they were able to reach the maximum potential that the group was able to reach had there not been the social distancing limitations. So on the one hand, you got these groups like aespa or LE SSERAFIM that have these large companies backing them. And then on the other hand, you got the small companies like with Lunar Solar or even UA or Weekly who didn't make it or barely made it through because of being limited with how much work that they could do at the time. And you mentioned earlier about getting the shots and wearing masks and things like that. This is the height of the pandemic we're talking about here. So getting sick was actually a huge possibility. And it actually happened. Like idols did get sick, or there was sometimes situations where an idol would have to quarantine or a group would have to go one or less, or even I think one time like the whole group got sick in the case of Everglow. So there's been cases of that. Do you think that idols getting sick affected them not just physically, but also mentally, given their demanding schedules? And do you think that this affected their companies and their performances?
I think at first, obviously, it affected them physically. But I think the mental effects of it were probably just as significant because, man, the first idol that I remember getting COVID and the headlines were like, oh, they got a quarantine was Jung. She was in Italy. And at that time, at just the beginning of this, right, Europe and Italy, it was spreading really quickly. And she happened to be there for an event. She caught it. 2 of her managers, 2 of her staff members caught it. They had to quarantine. And because she's one of the first big artists to get this, you had all this attention on her. And you know the K-pop world, she gets backlash for why was she even at this event? She was getting criticized. And I think she's done interviews since talking about that mental experience. So I can't imagine how maybe embarrassing, for lack of a better term, how embarrassing it was. On top of now she cannot work, right? Now she can't do these things. All her schedules are getting canceled or postponed. And for someone in her position where she is a huge part of that company, they probably put a lot of pressure was on her. So I can't even imagine what she was going through at that time. Although the thing I think about in the long run, I think this was a positive thing. Here's why. 2019, you remember Twice as Mina going on hiatus for her own mental health and things like that.
Right.
And that was kind of the first big hiatus. You mentioned going to Twice Lights. I also went to Twice Lights. Mina was not there, right? And that's because of her hiatus. I feel like, after Jung had to go on hiatus because of this, other artists started having to go on hiatus. Entire groups, Everglow had to go on hiatus. It made taking a break because of your health, if I remember correctly, starting here on, it made that a lot more normal. Whether it was your physical health or your mental health. I think Mina went away for the mental health, and that was kind of what's going on? It's a good thing, but I think before that, we didn't see that much. I think in the long run, artists catching COVID, having to take a break became a good thing because now it's not out of the ordinary for an artist to, hey, we're going on a hiatus for a few weeks or for this promotion or something like that, because we want to take care of our health. And I think that was an unexpected result of COVID. Is there a moment like that you remember as well?
So you bring up a great point because before the pandemic, I would say, especially during 2nd gen and 3rd gen, there was a lot of cases of overworking.
Yes.
Mental health was definitely not an issue, not something that was really considered.
How many idols did we see collapse on the stage?
Right. I mean, it maybe still happen. I don't really hear much about it these days. And if it does happen, it's, a sudden situation. It's not something that they're just completely overworked.
Yeah.
But I think JYP Entertainment was always the forefront leader as far as taking care of their idols. So when they started moving towards being more accepting of mental health issues with giving Mina the break, that was kind of the start. Mm-hmm. But I think with COVID, like you said, when people got sick and they were forced to take a break, it kind of showed companies that, hey, even if the idol needs to take a break, we can still get things done.
Yeah, I kind of forced them to.
Yeah, it made it more regular.
Less taboo, yeah.
Yeah, the artists, for whatever reason, may sit something out. Now, as far as for me, I personally remember KCON 2022. So I was there specifically for Stacy, KCON LA 2022. Obviously, it was a huge KCON, but I remember just praying because not only was there KCON LA, But that was the first and only year where they had the KCON tour around the country that Stacy was a part of. Stacy, Lightsome, Gravity, and TL1. And I remember from KCON LA, I was just praying, please don't let these artists get sick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I had tickets for KCON LA. I had tickets for the KCON tour, multiple stops. And I just remember, especially Stacy, I really didn't want Stacy to get sick. I remember watching a Lightsome video where they were performing. I think they were at Santa Monica or something, and they were performing in public. And I was like, please, Lightsome, don't get sick. Yeah, even as a fan, that time with COVID, where the potential for artists to get sick and having to cancel the tour or having a member having to sit out the tour, that was a real possibility. And I remember that was one of the things that, oh, please just, I don't want to get sick. I don't want the artists to get sick, because it would just ruin like the whole. I mean, I wouldn't completely ruin it, but it would have a huge effect, right? Like if I got sick, obviously I wouldn't be able to go to the show. If the artist got sick, I wouldn't be able to see them, right? So did you have any moments like that?
I did. And let me tell you about it. Okay. So I had floor tickets to Stray Kids in Atlanta. And like you said, you're like, oh, please don't get sick. I don't want to get sick. I'm traveling to Atlanta. I'm in a plane, blah, 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 right? We get there. Okay. Everything seems good. We're in Atlanta. The concert's the next day, 1 a.m. 1 a.m., we get an email. Hey, 3 members caught COVID. The concert's off. In the hotel, 1 a.m. That's the story that stands out to me. The other ones are things that got canceled before I even had a chance to go, right? Idol was touring, and that would have been the last time we saw Soojin with Idol. So that's something I will never see again, or I will never see. And then the one that keeps me up at night, I wake up in cold sweats twice a week thinking about this. Big Bang were going to make an epic return as a group at Coachella in 2020. 1 month before that happens, COVID hits, everything gets shut down, and I possibly will never get to see that again. Oh, that makes me so sad. Well, yeah, those are my experiences.
Yeah, I remember that Stray Kids situation. You actually did end up going to the rebooked concert, right?
It got postponed the year later. So I did end up going, same seats and everything like that. I will say everything worked out for the better. But, at the time, you're like, oh my God.
Yeah, obviously. Like, that's such a bummer, especially like you were there the day before.
Yeah.
You had to fly out there.
I had to fly out there.
And then it gets canceled. That was one of the greatest fears for me during the pandemic. And I'm glad it didn't happen to me, but I'm sad to hear, or I was sad to hear when it happened to you.
It's okay. Things worked out.
And yeah, you mentioned Idol, you mentioned Big Bang. Obviously, I don't know what's going to happen with the Idol situation, but Big Bang, I do think you'll have chances.
I'm hoping so. Next year's 20 years. I have faith in Top.
Yeah. One of the greatest things that we can have is hope.
Thank you, Ellis.
So during this time, during the pandemic, there was a huge growth of fans. And I know a lot of things were really booming around that time. I remember like Pokemon cards had a big boom. YouTube obviously had a big boom.
Sourdough bread had a big boom.
But K-pop, I know firsthand because we have a bunch of friends that became fans of K-pop during the pandemic.
That's true.
What do you think it is? And what do you think caused that?
I think the answer is something everybody's probably heard a lot. People were at home. People were trying to find things to watch with their families. And especially, I think the big one is they're trying to find communities to be a part of because we could not do it physically, right? And that's part of why TikTok skyrocketed. TikTok was very unique in a way where it was trends. This trend started taking off. This trend started. So when this trend starts, you join in on that trend. That coincided with this dance challenge thing that was happening in K-pop, when new songs came out. And I'll bring it up, the NBA and WWE examples again. Unlike those two worlds, when people were searching for things to connect and watch together, the lack of an audience didn't affect the K-pop content that we were consuming as much. And it more closely resembled what was going on before the pandemic than most other things. So I think that's the reason, more people were online. more content was being pumped out now by the K-pop companies, like we said, because that's all they could really do. And that brought more attention and eyeballs to K-pop as we started coming out of the pandemic. Is there another reason you think? Is there a reason I didn't say yet?
Yeah, I mean, the TikTok algorithm, the YouTube algorithm, you know how it is.
Yeah.
TikTok in particular, it's all about trends. And you mentioned the trends. YouTube, you get recommended one video and then you're down the rabbit hole. Suddenly all the videos that is recommended to you are all K-pop. Like you watch one K-pop video and then suddenly your entire algorithm is K-pop. You watch one cooking video and then your entire algorithm is cooking videos. So obviously when people are at home, that's something that they were doing. Social media, YouTube. I was doing it. I was on social media. I was on YouTube.
Yeah.
And yeah, that creates a growth. But what is it about K-pop that has a hold on people? I feel when people get into K-pop, it grips them. I don't know if it's the parasocial aspect of it, but in particular during the pandemic, I think it was a way for people to escape reality. And honestly, for me, like when I was a child and I got into K-pop, in a way, it was an escape for me at the time. And it's one of the reasons why K-pop has stuck with me for my entire life. I think during the pandemic, this was a escape mechanism for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think the escape is a huge thing. And I also think what you brought up, it's partly parasocial. I don't want the relationship between the fan and the artist is what I think really separates K-pop from a lot of other things.
But not just the relationship between the fan and the artist, like you mentioned earlier, the community of fans, because you and I, we wouldn't have met if it wasn't for K-pop.
No.
A lot of my closest friends now are because I met them through K-pop.
Like you said, it was an escape. It was like a search for community, and K-pop just happened to be that sweet spot, I feel, for a lot of people.
Yeah, 100%. So let's shift gears and move past the pandemic and discuss the lasting effects that it has caused for the state of K-pop today. So after the pandemic, there was just a huge influx of concerts.
Yeah.
What do you think has changed with the deluge of K-pop acts touring all over the world? Do you feel that it's sustainable?
No, I don't think it's sustainable. I think during the pandemic forced the pendulum to swing one way. And then once we started getting back, it aggressively swung the other way. But I understand that mindset because when concerts started coming back, I understand the mindset because it was also my mindset, right? We need to go to these concerts now, see our favorite artists because you never know if you'll ever get to. And now that we can see that it's entirely possible that that opportunity can get taken away from you at any moment. Like you said, this created the boom of tours and concerts and festivals. I think it created a false sense within these labels and touring companies that, hey, fans, they just want to go to concerts now. Let's just have our artists tour. Another thing is they were probably trying to find ways to make money coming out of the pandemic as well. But I don't think that works for every artist. I think there was a reason, like you mentioned, right before the pandemic, it was really only the bigger artists that we were watching besides KCON. I don't think it works for every artist. I don't think it works for every festival, as we've seen. How many festivals and world tours have we seen get canceled because of, quote, scheduling conflicts or, quote, unforeseen circumstances when we know it's because they didn't sell enough tickets? While fans do have that mindset that we need to see our favorite artist whenever we get a chance, when you saturate that market now, along with the ridiculous prices, especially which is relevant now that J-Hope's tour, their tickets are out and everyone's complaining about how high they are now, I think fans have now become way pickier on what to spend their money on. So I don't think it's sustainable at all. So I think the pendulum is going to have to swing back this way. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree, because 2022, we had just been enduring 2 years of a pandemic situation, lockdown. Tours and concerts were starting back up. I know for me, and surely a lot of other people based on my conversations with fans at different events, like you said, we want to go see these shows. We want to go out. We want to have fun. We want to see our favorite artists. 2022, I believe I went to 38 different concerts.
Yeah, my 2020 was insane, but it wasn't as insane as yours, I believe.
Yeah, 2023, I went to 45 different concerts. That's almost one concert a week. Last year, I scaled it back as much as I could. I went to 35. I went to 35 shows last year, 2024. Yeah. And I think a lot of people are just in that moment of scaling it back because not only has there just been so many shows and they've been all so expensive.
A lot of shows.
There was a festival called WeBridge.
Yes.
Which tried to happen in 2023 where their tickets went up to $3,000, I believe. I saw a lot of new promoters, a lot of new companies, a lot of new music festivals. They saw the boom that not just K-pop concerts were having, but the music industry as a whole. And they were trying to capitalize on it, but they just went about it all the wrong way.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but everyone's talking about the price of groceries these days. Things are not getting cheaper, and
the eggs, man.
Money, the eggs, but money, the money's not there. And yeah, people are just getting a lot more specific with what they want to watch, what they want to see, what they want to spend their money on. Inflation is high. Cost of living is high, and the disposable income is just not there for all these different shows. And I know there is a Saskatchewan festival up in Canada that they tried to do a Korean music festival. I mean, everyone and their mom was trying to create this new venture right after the pandemic. But honestly, for the most part, a lot of these music festivals and some of these promoters, they just had a lot of failures. Do you think these failures has affected the legitimacy of future events and them actually happening? Like Waterbomb last year, a lot of people was like, this is kind of a scam.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Unfortunately, it does affect the legitimacy. They just got to understand fans are not just going to go because it's a K-pop festival. We want value for what we're paying for. And
I think in 2022, maybe if it was a K-pop festival, you're going to have fans going because...
Yes, in 2022, yes.
I think before the pandemic, there just wasn't really a lot of K-pop events.
Yeah.
For fans to be able to go to a K-pop concert, let's go, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But once groups started doing their own tours, these music festivals outside of K-Con really lost their luster.
Yeah.
Because most fans would prefer to spend their money seeing their favorite artist for a full 2 to 3 hours versus 15 to 20 minutes at a music festival.
Why would I spend so much on WeBridge to see IVE when I know they're going to tour? They're going to have their own tour and I can see just IVE. I can get the benefits for the same or probably much lower price. Once fans start realizing I'll just wait for their tour. I think that's when festivals started seeing a lot of backlash and decline and resistance.
Do you think there is a way that music festivals can become a thing for K-pop?
Like a new one.
Yes, not like a K-Con. Because we have these WeBridges and these crazy K-pop.
Crazy, yeah.
We have these companies trying to do it, but I personally think they're going about it all the wrong way.
I think the only way is you have to have unique fan engagement activities. That's one of the reasons we like going to K-Con. We get to see them on stage, then we get to go to this panel, then we get to see them do this interview, then we go to this booth over here where they're going to be, that kind of thing, rather than going to WeBridge and I'm just kind of see them cycle through 2-3 songs and then the next artist comes and then maybe I'll get a meet and greet or something. But I think the only way a festival could see any kind of success is you have to bring the fan engagement stuff with it. What do you think?
No, you bring up a great point because K-pop, as we had been discussing this entire time, is built off of fan engagements. During the pandemic, they had to find a way to do fan engagements. And after the pandemic, you have to find a way to do fan engagements.
Yeah. Because if it's just performances, I'm going to wait for the tour.
Yeah, I mean, things have definitely changed since the pandemic. And now we have hybrid events as well. We have offline fan engagements. We have online fan engagements. We have the video call fan signs. We have the in-person fan signs. We have the in-person concerts. We have the online concerts. I feel that K-pop has improved. What do you think?
Yeah, I think simple answer. Overall, it's a net positive. International fans have something. We have a way to experience things live and feel the energy of the audience that's there. It's just all those things are another way for us to connect to the artist. And now companies, especially smaller companies, have a way of profiting while providing that experience. So I think it's a positive overall.
We've both experienced both virtual experiences, these online concerts and these video fan signs, as well as the physical fan signs and these in-person concerts.
Mm-hmm.
How would you compare the two? Is there one that you prefer?
I think no matter what, I'm going to prefer the in-person one, because I don't think you can beat that experience. I still get when you see a K-pop idol in person, I still get like, oh, can't believe they're real. I think you've experienced it more than me. So is there something that I'm not seeing yet?
I don't think so. Personally, for me, I think in-person activities trumps all. But I do have friends who really love video calls, and they just consistently do video calls.
Yeah.
And I can see the positives of doing all those video calls, because it really is the easiest way to get to know your favorite artists. But for me, the number one thing I value is going to concerts, seeing the artists in person perform for 2+ hours, right? I think that is my favorite thing about K-pop.
Yep.
But I do think it's a great thing to have these video calls and online concerts, because like we discussed earlier, watching that online STAYC concert,
it was fun.
Was great.
Yeah.
Having a video call with the artist that you just saw, that's something that I did with STAYC. I saw them during their tour, and then they had a video call event just a couple months after. And it was great to reconnect with them after that time during a period where they didn't really have any other activities.
Yeah.
So 100%, I think these hybrid events, being able to do online and offline, has definitely improved my experience.
What I love about the live experience is the people around me. So we met because of K-pop events. The group we're going to Korea with, we met at events, and part of the reason we became such good friends if you think about it, we've only known each other for
2 years.
2 years, yeah, right?
Well, you and I 2 years, but our other friends less,
yeah, even less so. But it doesn't really feel like that, and I think the reason is, like you said, nothing beats being at that concert for 2.5 hours. It's such an intense experience. It's an emotional experience, and you're going through that together. And by the end of it, for whatever reason, even though it's not like we're talking to each other the entire time, we just feel so connected because of it. And like you said, for me, that's the reason going to the concerts in person, I don't think anything beats that at the end of the day.
Was there anything that stood out to you during the pandemic?
I think the things that stood out to me the most in the pandemic was all the little stories about how things changed and what they would have looked like if the pandemic was not a thing. I'll give you an example. CLC disbanded in 2022, but they were inactive for over a year and a half before that. So basically starting in the heart of the pandemic. So you wonder, if COVID never happened, would CLC's career have looked different? Maybe even still going today in some way at another company? Would that have affected Yoojin's involvement in Girls Planet 999, which birthed Kepler? Another example close to our hearts, STAYC, right? There's a documentary on YouTube, and you see pre-debut STAYC, and they're one of the very few groups these days that have all Korean members. But if COVID never happened, that might have been a different case. One of the trainees in the documentary that you see, she looked like she was set to debut with them. She was Taiwanese. She went back to Taiwan because of the pandemic, but it was also the reason she couldn't go back to Korea. STAYC would have changed forever because of that. Her life has changed forever because of that. To me, it's those little stories that interest me the most when we look at the K-pop landscape post-COVID. What about you? What stood out to you?
You bring up a great point, because IZ*ONE had to end their career during the pandemic.
Yes.
And who knows what would have happened if there wasn't a pandemic. So yeah, things like that definitely stand out. And yeah, I mean, we've already gone over all the innovations and things that have improved K-pop. But do you feel that the way that you consume K-pop today is different than it was 5-6 years ago?
Oh, yeah. I mean, going back through everything we talked about today, from the content we had available to us versus what it is now, I do feel my connection to the artists is very different. I think it's a good thing. I think it's also ironic that from this thing that forced us to isolate and quarantine and get away from any kind of physical human contact that we are now closer to these artists than ever before. And yes, like many other things, that comes with its pros and cons, but it's something that has forever changed the industry. So I do feel that's changed for me.
I have to agree, because who knows what the relationship between us, the rest of my friends that I met through K-pop concerts, who knows what it could have been. But definitely what I can say is that with all the content and all the ways to meet your favorite idols these days, K-pop is definitely in a different place. Is it better? I think that is for the individual to decide. With that, we'll end our conversation about what happened 5 years ago today. Let's move on to what happened 10 years ago today. So 10 years ago today, it was actually this week, because there's nothing really specific that happened today. But this week, a couple of solo debuts happened. First of all, CNBlue's Yonghwa debuted with One Fine Day, solo debut album. And G.Soul from JYP Entertainment at the time had his solo debut with Coming Home and the single You. Do you remember those debuts at all?
I mean, I was definitely a fan of CNBlue. I think they're a very important part of, K-pop history, especially as a band. I was a fan of the members' individual activities. Very jealous of Minhyuk, who got to co-star with FX's Crystal in the drama Airs. Very jealous. But as far as Yonghwa's debut, I don't remember it. I listened to it in prep for this podcast. And so obviously it wasn't something I take with me 10 years later. But I am happy that 10 years later, they are still receiving a lot of love. They put out an album late last year. They had the concert. So it's cool to see them still active. What I do remember is G.Soul's debut. Yeah, because I was looking forward to his debut for a long time. If you were deep into K-pop as much as we were, watching variety shows and things like that, I think both of us always heard about this guy, this legendary trainee who has been with JYP for 15 years at this point, G.Soul, right? Especially from JYP idols who were trainees for a very long time, 2AM's Jokwon, Wonder Girl's Sunye, and it was finally time for him to step up in the spotlight. And to be honest, I didn't really listen to him much after that, I feel. I don't really have any of his stuff in my playlist or anything like that. But you know what's funny? Just like Yonghwa, I listened to his debut song You in prep for this podcast, and oh my god, I'm so sorry, G.Soul. I love it. I don't know what was going on at that time. I wish I would have supported more. His debut song, his voice, oh, so good. Again, my apologies, G.Soul. I hope you're doing well these days. I really regret that now. I really do. What about you?
So for Yonghwa, Jung Yonghwa, I really liked CNBlue. I still like CNBlue, and you mentioned them. We actually have a friend who is a big CNBlue fan. But personally for me, I don't actually really remember his solo debut.
Yeah.
So I don't really have much to say to that, but I did want to include that because I think it is an important part of K-pop history, that group and that person. As far as G.Soul is concerned, I was aware of G.Soul since 2007 because I had attended a JYP concert in New York where G.Soul opened for JYP.
Wait, a JYP like Park Jin-young?
Yeah, Park Jin-young. Yeah, Park Jin-young. He had a solo concert in New York, but it was not really just for him. He wanted to display the artists that he had training and the Wonder Girls. So I was there for Park Jin-young and the Wonder Girls.
Oh, wow.
But I was introduced to the person, G.Soul, and Min, who would later go on to become the leader of Miss A.
Oh my goodness.
So that was my first experience with both G.Soul and Min. I had mentioned in the previous episode, like Min lives in New York now, so that's really cool. G.Soul at the time lived in New York for quite a while. He is mainly known as an R&B singer.
Yeah.
And although he doesn't have a ton of music, the music that he's released is very good.
I'm so sorry, G.Soul.
And whether it be a single or an OST, he definitely has something. His name is very apt. Because when you listen to him, it's amazing what you hear. And Highly recommend if you are not aware of who G.Soul is. I'm sure a lot of people are aware of who Yonghwa is, but G.Soul, I'm not sure how many people actually are familiar with him. He's no longer with JYP Entertainment, but he still puts out great music. Definitely recommend checking out G.Soul. So Yonghwa debuted on January 20th and G.Soul debuted on January 19th. Another thing that happened on January 19th, 2015 was the former after-school leader Kahi announced her decision to leave Pledis Entertainment. So Kahi actually left after school. She, quote, graduated after school, I believe in 2012, but she was still with Pledis doing solo work until 2015, where she announced her decision to leave Pledis. Do you have any thoughts about her leaving?
For me personally, it was kind of sad for me. I was such a big after school fan. Fun fact, their song Because of You was my alarm to wake up for school for quite a while. And to keep it fresh, I would alternate what part of the song woke me up. I don't recommend doing that anymore because you'll hate whatever song is at your alarm. But I think looking back, Kahi might have been my bias in that group. Her history as a backup dancer for BoA was really cool, all the way to becoming the leader of After School. She was very fit. She had a different frame than a lot of other K-pop girls, which I loved. And at this point in time, like you said, she already graduated from After School, and new members have come in. But her leaving Pledis really hit me as it's the end of that era. But hey, I still keep up with her from time to time on Instagram these days. That's how much I love her. So what was your thoughts about that? Were you an after school fan?
So personally for me, I was actually not a big fan of Kahi. I was a big fan of After School. You mentioned that song Because of You. That was one of my karaoke classics, Norebang classics back when that first came out. And if you play that, I can still do Becca's rap.
Oh,
yeah, but that was the first song that what would become my after school bias. Reina. She debuted with that song.
Yes.
So that has a special place in my heart. But obviously, you cannot overlook the impact that Kahi had, not just on After School, but the industry with her creativity. I don't know if you remember the song called Bang.
Yes, of course.
She made her group learn how to play the snare to do the drum line for that song.
Oh my
that
God.
was incredible. Obviously, her dancing skills are renowned. She was a dance instructor or mentor during the Produce series. But as many K-pop fans from that time period are aware, and maybe even K-pop historians of today know, Pledis is not the greatest company when it comes to girl groups. The graduation of Kahi at the time was baffling because she was essentially the heart and soul of After School. And her leaving Pledis was kind of just a sad remnant of what had been left of her career. I believe now she is a wife and mother.
Yep.
But yeah, Pledis Entertainment has never had a great reputation when it comes to girl groups. Honestly, it was probably a good decision that Kahi left Pledis Entertainment, but yeah, that's my take on it. Wee woo, motherfucker. People who are aware of Pristin.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to talk about is ZICO. He's my favorite male artist, ZICO.
Oh, really?
I had to bring this up because he made a comeback on January 25th, which is just a day later from the recording of the show 10 years ago, 2015, with the EP Break Up to Make Up. And the title track off of that was I Am You, You Are Me. It's probably one of my favorite ZICO songs.
Ooh.
It was one of his early works, obviously, 2015, as the leader of Block B. I was not actually a huge Block B fan, but for ZICO's solo works, I really love his music.
Yeah.
Do you remember this song at all?
I do remember the song because I feel like you hear it a lot. I like the song. It's just not one I listen to a lot. I feel like the last time I heard it was from his, speaking of Pledis girl groups, from his Nine's, Soyeon covered it last year. But I think the fact that she covered this song from 10 years ago speaks to how much it did stay with other people. Despite that, I'm a big ZICO fan as well. I like his music. I like Block B's music. I wasn't the biggest Block B fan, but I think a lot of their music was really good at the time too. So
yeah, they have a lot of great tracks that I like. I just wasn't a huge Block B fan.
Yeah, same.
But yeah, that ends our segment of 10 years ago today for this episode. Is there anything that you miss about how K-pop was before the pandemic?
I don't know if I could pull something off the top of my head that I miss. We talked about how hard it was to find subtitles way back then. I don't necessarily miss that. I do look back on it very fondly. Like we said, there's a lot of stuff these days to consume. I don't necessarily think going back to those days where we had less to consume, I don't think that would be a bad thing. But I also wouldn't really change anything. During our conversation, it made me realize a lot of things are the way they are today because the pandemic happened, and a lot of good came from that. And our friendship came from that. A lot of our mutual friends came from that, and our experiences together and with Stacy and all those things, that would have never happened. So I don't know if I miss anything. I look back on it very fondly, but I wouldn't change a thing.
I think one thing I do miss is JYP Entertainment artists having good fan engagements, like fan signs and group photos.
Oh, that is true, though. You're right. Them specifically, too.
Yeah. So that has been our discussion today about how the pandemic affected the K-pop industry. Any last words?
Not from me. But also, wee woo, mother.
This has been Diaries of an MZ Generation. Today is Friday, January 24th, 2025. We have been your hosts, Ellis Tan and Justin Lee. This is a production of Selective Hearing and is a part of the Selective Hearing network of podcasts. This episode is edited by Ellis Tan and Greg Abesamis. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one.